everybody. Um, Sorry for being so long in our new videos. I know everyone's been chomping at the bit, waiting for the next drop, but here we are. He's got a good one for us. So,
I
do you
actually
want to
got
tell us
two.
about the
Go ahead.
You just want to tell us
Go
about
ahead.
the
I'm
recent
sorry.
conference, or where are you going?
Well, it's called the Ministerial on the Resurgence of Political Terrorism, which was sponsored by the U.S. State Department and attended by over 60 countries, uh, ministers and whatnot from 60 different countries. And it's a call for a all-out war against the resurgence of something they are calling a left-wing terrorism, which is said to be uh, on the rise. I mean, what do they say? And by the way, I'm a little bit disorganized. I have a huge pile of notes about this. These three speeches by Marco Rubio, Stephen Miller, and Scott Besset, the Secretary of Treasury, and they are detailing the supposed. Uh, I'll just read something. In the United States, we have an all-out assault on our immigration officers, sniper attacks, explosives, armed ambushes. You see, they're painting a picture of total chaos and anarchy and riot going on in the United States, and they say the same about Europe. And ministers are being assassinated, and so forth. So they're painting us a picture of insurgency all around, and it's said to be an attack on civilization itself. So the left, as they like to say, is motivated by their hatred of civilization itself. So what we're going to see here is what George Orwell talked about, the way language is weaponized and abused and inverted, so that war is peace and so forth. And we want to see how basically my theme is the flexibility and malleability of language itself, and how words are probably your greatest enemy, because the context is that, and many people just don't really understand the leaders and the led, the elites and the masses. And if you read some of the reading, for example, Leo Strauss, who's the philosopher who is said to be the motivation for the neocons, philosopher from the University of Chicago that wrote. And if you read some of his things, it's very frank. There's two classes of human being: one elite and the mass of the population that needs to be controlled, led. He wrote I haven't read it, but he wrote huge defense and of Machiavelli. So we often hear the term Machiavellian and so on. And we also hear the term Orwellian. But the main thing is how they're using language to promote their hegemony and really to totally befuddle the mass. I mean, they're pretty much frank about it. Even Leo Strauss talks about using religion to befuddle the mass and to create the public myth. You know, the the gentleman that wrote the 9/11 investigation report, Chertoff,
Yeah.
his background is in creation of the public myth. And he he no, I'm confusing Chertoff with. I told you I'm a little disorganized here. I have in front of me a huge pile of notes, but let's get to the speeches. They're led off by a deputy secretary of state by the name of Landau, and he is referencing the Red Brigades and the Bader Meinhof group. Well, you may have heard about that from back in the day. In Germany, they supposedly established the Red Army faction. We're talking late mid 70s. If you read about Operation Gladio by the U.S. Security Services and European Security Services, CIA, they created these groups. You can read Danielle Ganser. You can read Webster Tarpley. You can read another fine history of that. You could even, you might even get some information from Wikipedia. It's well known, Operation Gladio. And what they were doing was blowing up train stations, Milan. They famously abducted Aldo Moro of the Prime Minister of Italy, and he was later killed. They assassinated people, and the whole thing was sponsored by the U.S.-backed so-called stay-behind armies, which were clandestine groups in all the countries of Europe, I think all of them, supposedly preparing for resistance to a Soviet invasion. But these were regroupments of fascists, former Nazis, and that sort of thing. And they were tasked with creating havoc and confusion and violence. And many of these were quite real. It's the terror attacks and mass shootings and so forth we have today. They're all fake. They're all. If you go back, I mean, we could talk about Oklahoma City, 1995, and
Yeah.
the thing was the building was blown up by the feds. And the only good news is that all those people that supposedly were killed were not. There may have been one or two, but none of them show up in the Social Security death register. None of the kids in the kindergarten that were supposedly blown apart. So that's the only good news about it. Apparently, it was 100% fake. But and what they fed the public was two right-wing militia types who parked a van filled with fertilizer, uh, some 50 or 60 feet from the front of the building, and this was a fertilizer bomb, and that blew up the van, I guess, but then destroyed the building. Any explosive expert, and we had many that have come forward. You could read, or you could watch the documentary. It's called "The Noble Lie." I recommend that, but we need to get started. People that are still kind of clueless about how the game is being played. Okay, so then you have domestic terrorism as a category. It's not a reality, it's a category. Netanyahu wrote the book back in the 90s about the new threat of terrorism. So this becomes the theme, you see. And trillions of dollars are invested in the fight against international terrorism. So you have the Red Army faction, you have the domestic militias, and now we supposedly have the resurgence of the radical left. Now, you would think that in their speeches, they would come up with a few examples of what they're talking about. They go to pardon me?
That's what I was going to ask you. What are some of the examples?
Yeah, well, after all this hour-long verbiage, they finally give a few examples of what they're talking about. Antifa. Antifa is not an organization. There is no Antifa. They've been now listed on the official register of a terrorist organization. But they don't happen to be an organization. But there was this slogan was adopted by many who were protesting police brutality, especially around the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis. And by the way, these demonstrations were peaceful, except for provocateurs provided, and we're going to link some because we need to provide references. So we're going to I can't explain everything here, so we're going to link some things in the notes, some video evidence that the provocateurs were what was tearing out, breaking the windows and everything, and then running away, and with the legitimate demonstrators chasing them down the street, asking what in the hell they're doing. But the point is to provide this imagery for the public. So what is let's just go through some of the terms they're using. What is the left? Does anybody know? I mean, we have movies that show leftist radicals in different, manners. But the average person, what do they think about it? What is the left? Well, those are the people that hate civilization. So if you're protesting against the mass murder and destruction in Palestine, that you're motivated by a hatred for everything good and wholesome and decent in our civilization, you see. You see how that's a bit twisted? And then those Pete Kegsbreath gives a big lecture to U.S. veterans in which he says there's two types of people: those that build and those that destroy. And he's giving this lecture to, as I said, the military, who every day get hectored about, not, what do they call it, lethality.
Yeah.
You know, that's all Keg's breath talks about is lethality. And all Trump can talk about is how proud they are about this sinking all the ships. You have like a, I'm hearing some static. Do you have like a fan on there or something?
Yeah, I have a fan on.
Turn that off. It's kind of bothering me. I'm having a little trouble getting in stride here. But think about it. Two types of people: us leftist revolutionaries who only know destruction, and the good people defending civilization and all things decent and good, who are murdering on a mass scale. So there's builders and there's destroyers. You know, I may even
Yeah,
go into a little personal defense since I'm in the dock here.
can I say?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that I think Pete Hegseth, they're just talking about the liberals. They're not really talking about a genuine left. Um, they're just painting the liberals are just confused as the so-called right wing.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with
They're
these terms. They're just so
I think
generic that
they're
they're meaningless.
anti-Trump. They're
What?
anti-Trump. They're the
Yeah, well,
liberals.
they
They're
conflate. They say here everything from the anarchists, the Marxists, to the Democratic Party. They specifically say. So, yeah, the terms are so fluid, and
there's
this
really
is by
no
design.
there's
What?
really there's no genuine left wing.
Well, we could discuss that.
That confuse the people around as yourself, you know.
Pardon me?
I said there's no genuine left wing in the United States. There's just a few oddballs linked around like yourself.
Well, that's not exactly true. I have been involved, I think, in a genuine left for about 50 years. Uh,
That might have
those are the
been
people that you don't know about, though. The people that they want to call the left, I guess, uh, are, whoever they want to designate. But getting to this point about the builders and the destroyers, two types of people. This is what Miller says. Two types of people in this world. Now, I am one of the destroyers by virtue of being a left wing communist. And I would beg to differ. Now, Trump and them are bragging about taking 150 Iranian ships to the bottom of the sea. Hey, they think they're funny. They say, we're going to share the sea with Iranians. We're going to give them the bottom half. We're going to take the top half. They think that's so clever.
It's pretty funny.
The, you know, I've known some shipbuilders in my life when I was in a certain political party. We had people on the West Coast, we had people on the East Coast. One man at Electric Boat out there in, I think, New Jersey, and he was trying to organize on the shipyards. But he was a welder, you know. And I knew two young, not well, but was writing for our paper out on the West Coast, two young women who were welding on the shipyards. And you know, when you think about it, you could spend your whole life, your whole 30 years career welding, your lungs would be shot long before 30 years, but anyway. And you would never really be able to build one ship. I mean, you know, if you put all your efforts together, you know, it probably wouldn't add up to one ship in 30 years of hard work. And they are so gleeful about taking 150 ships to the bottom of the sea. But these are the builders, you see. They are, Trump talks about building our military. He's taking credit for building up our military. You think the man ever held the business end of a hammer? Or ever built anything? Ever built a birdhouse or anything? Probably not. Then they talk about our tools. Yeah, and let's finish this point. They talk about uh, Miller and Rubio and them. They talk about the new tools that they're developing to track down the left wing terrorists. Well, you see, these are euphemisms. They've never held a tool in their life. But they're tools, you see. They're building. So, you know, again, it's the misuse, it's the ambiguity and misuse of language. I'm sorry, go ahead. I interrupted.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in Trump's case, he built because he had the capital and needed.
Good point. Yeah, he talks about, "Hey, I built two casinos. I built I built a golf course. I built this and I built the towers and I built everything. It's euphemistic. Never built a goddamn thing in his life. You know, not to get off the subject, but I questioned my parents one time because they say, when we went to we moved to a different city. We decided to build because we couldn't find a house that was just to our liking. We thought we would build, so we built. I said, well, you're using that term. You mean you paid to have it built? Okay, and let's just say things correctly. But yeah, good point about Trump. I mean, you got a bunch of money together and a bunch of loans, and you hire contractors to build. So you didn't build a goddamn thing. Good point.
It's just how you say it.
Yeah, manner of speaking. Yeah, but it disguises reality. And that's what I would have to say almost all the language. I'm going to go through some of these words they use. Fanaticism. Okay, or radicalism. I got radicalized in the 1960s when I learned something about the Holocaust in Southeast Asia. Millions killed for U.S. imperialist designs. So I was radicalized. Well, that term is so common that everybody knows what that means. Uh, and I
You became
joined,
fanatical for the cause.
yeah, pardon me?
You became fanatical for the cause.
Yeah, well, I think fanaticism might fit me uh, pretty well. Single mindedness. I'll accept that. I accept some of these terms. Bring them on. But I don't accept that I'm motivated by, what is it, hatred of humanity and hatred of civilization, hatred of the family, hatred of, uh, decency. I don't accept that part. I was fanaticism. I'll accept that. Extremism. Think about that word. Extreme means you're out of the what is it? The window. The what do they get a term for it? The this window that shifts according to uh, Overton. Yeah, look that up. The Overton window. Well, this is where the structure, the conversation or the national dialogue within certain parameters, so that they already know the outcome. So we have, of course, the Democratic and Republican parties, what each of them are saying, and so that would be the Overton window. So if you're to the left of that, and again, these concepts of left and right really need to be parsed because they don't have any inherent meaning except the left originally, from the French Revolution was the commoners, and the right was the royalty and the elite and the nobility. So there's always a class content to left and right, and we could trace that on to today. But if you are then to the left of the Overton window, then you're by definition extremist. You see. So if you, in other words, if you're protesting against the Holocaust in Gaza, you're a left-wing extremist. Murdering and destroying 90% of the structures in Gaza, that's non-extremism. That's normality and perfectly legitimate. And I don't think these people who are talking about destruction versus construction even realize that each and every one of those buildings and houses was built by someone. You see, they're just there for these people to be targets, to be destroyed. No idea. You stop to realize what it takes to build. And I may, bring my own bio into this, which I don't like to do, but since I'm being accused of these terrible destructive tendencies and motivations, I started my working career, if we don't want to talk about mowing lawns and washing cars, when I started, my first real job was on oil wells. So I was pulling pipe from exhausted oil wells in Newark, and I worked hard. I started at 7 in the morning, and so on and so forth. And I would come home covered with oil, and that was another problem because you throw it in the washing machine, and then the other people in your rooming house are complaining. And so I had another problem, how to clean my clothes, and so forth. So I did that for a year or so, and then I got drafted in the Army, and that wasn't a picnic either. And when I got out of there and was, went on the campaign for McGovern for about 5 or 6 months, then I went to work in Buckeye Steel Castings. And in that, what we were doing is making infrastructure for train cars, and that's what I was doing. So when I see a train, I say, "Well, I helped make the bolster and the coupler and the mainsprings and so forth." And if I see one get blown up, I'm not gleeful like this little rump and little Miller punk who's never done a day's work in his life. I'm not all gleeful. I like whoa, we destroyed the bridges. We destroyed the bridges. You know how many bridges the Works Project Administration built, the unemployed in the United States? About 8,000 bridges. And these punks get so much pleasure bragging about blowing them up around the world. So, you see, I don't think it is exaggeration to say it's the exact opposite. The working class, which the left intends to identify with and organize, are the builders. These capitalist parasites can only destroy with the vast militaries that they have built. They build anything. All they did was go to the Congress and get another $1 trillion and send that out to the Boeing and Raytheon and all of them, and everybody getting their cut. And I'm getting a little off the subject of these discourses, but they're very important. These are meant to be ideological direction for, as I say, over 60 countries involved in the campaign to exterminate the left, cut off their funding, how do they say it, track them down. Of course, they reference 9/11. Now, look, we've done several episodes on 9/11. There is no doubt that this was an inside job. Well, now, why? Look, they set up the stage for 7 or 8 wars abroad, for the evisceration of the Bill of Rights in the United States, the setup of the surveillance state system in the United States. This is the way it works. So they created terror in Europe, Operation Gladio. So then they have the pretext to double and triple their police and military and their intelligence services and track people down, have people imprisoned and so forth to defend the social order. This is the noble lie. It's not so noble, in my opinion, but it goes all the way back to Greece, Plato. The leadership must create, uh, how did he put it? Well, a public version of events that people are supposed to believe in, and to legitimize the power of the state. So, yes, they reference 9/11, of course, and but they say that Rubio argues that after 9/11, we became fixated on the Islamic variety of terrorism to the exclusion of the left wing variety of terrorism. And he says that there's an extraordinary ideological prejudice which excuses left wing violence and only fixates on right wing, fascist, or Islamic violence. Now, have you ever see we have a blind spot when it comes to the extremist violence of the political left? If you know anything about the history of this country, a blind spot to the political left. What was McCarthyism all about? And now the new McCarthyism that they're calling for here. The whole of U.S. foreign and domestic policy has been to root out the left for since the 1800s. Well, what is the Red Scare of after the First World War or the Palmer raids? What's the as they say, the McCarthyism came about a little later, and on to the law and order and the murder of the Black Panther Party in the United States. You see, most people think, well, they're Black Panthers. They posed with guns in the street in a couple of instances out in Oakland. So they're terrorists. And of course, then this movie's made. And this is where people get their idea. They never knew a Black Panther. Black Panthers didn't kill anybody. Okay? Didn't kill anybody. They were trying to make a point about the right to bear arms, which is many on the right would want a right that they would want for themselves, but not a bunch of niggers with guns. And they mention, yeah, most of they mention it's back in the day. They mention the Black Panthers and the Patty Hearst. What was that? Oh yeah, the Symbionese Liberation Army. How
Well,
the what?
didn't I send you a video of like the resurgence of the Black Panther Party?
Oh yeah, they have the what they're calling themselves the New Panther Party. I haven't seen much of activity from them, but
Well,
just an idea, wasn't it?
and I'm not really sure if the leader is. It could just all be a psyop. he walks around. I don't know where they're at.
Oh yeah, he did appear in public armed, right? Yeah, yeah. I saw
And they're
that you
just
sent a couple of years ago, but I haven't heard any more from him.
and the cops don't do it. You know, the cops don't do anything. They just kind of. So I don't know. I just had kind of saw that maybe he was trying to make it a big show.
Well, it's always possible. We're so
I
uh,
forget.
infiltrated and manipulated that if you see an organization, you don't. I was going to mention the Symbionese liberation. You know, these CIA and FBI types. They they pride themselves on some of their terms they come up with. There's no Symbionese, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean, Liberation Army, but they were heavily infiltrated, or 100% infiltrated, and they did kidnap Patty Hearst of the Hearst newspaper monopoly. And that was a big thing that you hear about and hear about it at that time. And then we got started with the school shootings out there in yeah, where was it? Fake school shootings, and then of course now rapid fire. They reference the two Jewish members of the that were shot in supposedly shot in D.C. What was that, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, in front of the Jewish Museum, and this is, you see, then terror, anti-Semitic terror, just raging across the country. You see, they're creating it's pure imagery. Let me give you some of their language. I'm tired of hearing me talk, I'm sure. On and on with my words here. I was intending to read some from these speeches, and you can draw your own conclusions. They say that Rubio says that left wing violence was not just excused, it was treated as sacrosanct, a protected class unto itself. That era has to end. Well, you can judge for yourself whether left wing violence has been sacrosanct. Or maybe you can notice that the ICE protesters, anti ICE protesters, anti Gaza protesters have been arrested, abused, and beaten, and jailed, and in some cases murdered, like Miss Good and Andrew Pretty in Minneapolis, and a couple of others. So you can judge for yourself about that sort of thing. Then he goes on to his European colleagues. He says, "You are here because your political leaders are being attacked and stabbed and shot in your streets, because your businesses have been bombed, because your railways have been sabotaged, because your police officers have been beaten and burned. You are here because this is real and it's getting worse." Now, some might say that's hyperbolic. It's beyond hyperbolic. It's what they, wonderful term we have from the Yiddish Jewish language, is chutzpah. It's called chutzpah. And if you don't know what that is, audacious lying. Okay. And the bigger the lie, the better, of course. And I don't think police are being beaten and burned throughout Europe and so on and so forth. You judge for yourself. Of course, in the U.S. context, they must reference the uh, two assassination attempts against our president. Huh? If anybody thinks that Donald Trump got shot in the ear, you really need to regroup. It wasn't shot in the ear. It was a big show. You see the difference? Nobody shot Trump in the ear. And the other one at the ballroom, a little fake job, a joke. Check it out. Check it out. There's been investigations online. You can check it. What's going on in the United States? If you live there, look out your window and see if there's blood running down the streets. An all-out assault on our immigration officers, sniper attacks, explosives, armed ambushes. Armed ambushes? And no reference there. A transgender shooter opening fire at a Catholic university. No, that didn't happen. That was a fake deal.
That's the one I was talking about.
Multiple assassination attempts on our sitting president. The left represents a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. They cannot build, they cannot create. And they take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy. Now, I do have some inadequacies, but that's not my motivation. Seeking to destroy those who can create and build. I guess it's our great capitalists who are doing all the creating and building. It's poisonous resentment, cloaked in the language of equality and justice. An overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful. Here again is what is happening in Palestine or in Iran, Syria, Iraq, and around the world. What is beautiful to these people that we're trying to tear down? Filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. Only violence and terror. Violence and terror. You know, I have to interject here. There hasn't been a single instance of Marxist terrorism in the history of the world. They say, well, Dave, that's a little bit. No, look, you go back to the early days of the socialist movement, Marx and Engels polemicized, and they banned anarchist and terrorist types from the First International. And then, of course, the Lenin did the same later on. The Bolsheviks relentlessly opposed individual acts of terror. Why? Because they obviously don't produce anything. And at the same time, they offer a pretext to the authorities, to the police, to crack down on the workers' movement. And for that reason, they were irreconcilably opposed. So if like Lenin's brother got involved with a assassination plot against the Tsar or one of his ministers, well, yeah, apparently that did happen, and he was executed for that. But he wasn't a Marxist. By definition, the only terrorist acts that can be ascribed to communists would have been in the resistance movements in Europe against Nazi occupation, led in every country by the communists. And yes, they did carry out what could be described as acts of, terror or destruction, bombing, Molotov cocktails going through the windows at the police station, things like that. So yes, there was no possibility for open, certainly not legal, opposition to Nazi occupation or Nazi regime in Germany itself. So they resorted, if you like, to certain acts that Hitler and Goebbels and them endlessly talked about the threat of terrorism. But in any other time, whether it be in Latin America or anywhere in the world, if there are individual acts of terrorism, they're not Marxist. They're not Marxist, as I say, by definition. So this whole idea of Marxist terrorism, now they're saying that the Marxist terrorists have allied themselves with the Islamist terrorists, you say here. Now, who do you think was allied with the Islamic terrorists in Afghanistan? Who do you think created Al Qaeda? Who's working with ISIS in Syria and murdering Soleimani before fighting against ISIS and so forth? They've used Islamic fanaticism for many, many years. They used it in Indonesia, in the case where I know best, in 1965, to destabilize the democratic regime. They used the Islamists, fanatics, we can use that word. They've used it in the Middle East. Who do you think funded Hamas? Netanyahu and his securities apparatus. And in an Islamist group now being funded in Gaza, forget their name, that is enemy of Hamas, and they're supporting them. So there's no alliance between the Marxist left and Islamists. I guess if you want to say there's Muslim people and leftists in these Gaza, anti Israel protests today, trying to speak in civilized words on campus, are allied, but they're not terrorists. I'll go on here, and I don't want to keep people all afternoon. I'm just occasionally getting diverted here. Uh, so you see the language they're using to describe people like me. They envision communism envisions a world without God. Well, that needs an entire episode to itself. We'll leave that. And then, of course, they're going hammer and tongs against Cuba. So, in conjunction with this conference, they've published a 100-page document about the threat that Cuba presents to the world and how Cuba is supporting these left-wing radicals in the U.S., Europe, around the world, and how they are the center. You see, in the Cold War, we had, I say we, the U.S. establishment had a formidable enemy in the socialist camp, Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, later China for a time. And so this necessitated an all-out destruction of the European left with Operation Gladio that I mentioned, and the destruction of the U.S. left with murder of the Panthers and state repression, murder of King. He was a leftist, you know. Yeah, he was a leftist that hated humanity. A Christian terrorist, you know, Martin Luther King. Anyway, so they managed to turn the world around. The Reagan huge militarization of the world, finally bankrupted after they flipped to China. They were able to bankrupt the socialist camp using all of their control of international finance and sanctions and sabotage and regrouping all the former Nazis in Europe we see now in Ukraine and so on. So I haven't read the document on Cuba. I read about it, but it blames Cuba for damn near everything and probably preparing. They've already strengthened the sanctions that have been on Cuba for 40 or how many ever years it has been, and now a strict oil embargo, and they're trying to bring this little island that has defied the imperium for all of these years. And we have to see how that goes or whether that results in an invasion, which you see these words and these documents, statements, the national security apparatus of the United States, the warfare state in search of enemies. You don't have enemies. What does that do to your arms industry, for one thing? And what does it do for your national cohesion? You have to have an enemy. So no longer the Soviet bloc. That, as I said, was somewhat of a credible opposition, but now it's Cuba to be worried about. So that was Rubio. A few of the comments by Stephen Miller. You know, they call them little Goebbels. Uh, we need our law enforcement and intelligence agencies to work together to disrupt, identify, defund, debank. It's the same thing again. Arrest and prosecute these political terrorists that are operating in our country. Are those that lend support to these left wing terrorists. Antifa is mentioned. I've already mentioned it's not even an organization. And trust me, Americans, you don't really have of a list of worries. I wouldn't put them in the top 100, really, even if you thought they were real. What are the hallmarks of left wing violence and terrorism? It's complete pretextual and disingenuous appeal to civil liberties. Oh, in an effort to shield its own violence. So if we talk about our right to free speech or what have you, right, to be exempt from arbitrary arrest, accused of domestic terrorism, and we might hire an attorney to defend us. Well, we're just using that as a shield for our violence. You know, I might mention here, because he's going specifically against jury trials. I'll read it here. But they don't really believe in civil rights, nor in the notion of justice and so forth and so on. Here somewhere they're talking about how juries have allowed, getting back to what he said about the left being handled with kid gloves. Many juries, they say, have exonerated terrorists that should have been buried under the prisons. You know? And that does remind me of back in the 70s when we were protesting the Ku Klux Klan rally in Columbus, Ohio. And they sent in plainclothes police officers basically attacking our protest. And I did assault one of the officers. We later learned were ossifers. But as far as we know, they were just thugs. So I was facing 20 to 25 and assaulting a police officer. Assaulted him pretty bad, the weapon. And we had a jury of our peers. Interesting episode in my life. It lasted for 2 or 3 weeks. Even in the process of voir dire, I learned some of the lingo. Voir dire is where prospective jurists that are selected from the polling, electoral list, and you get a pool of prospective uh, jurors, and then we have a right to question them, as does the prosecution side, and to challenge a certain number of them, throw them out, get someone else. Now, I think you get like 4 challenges, 3 or 4 challenges. We challenged a couple, but we're fortunate. I got one guy named Mr. Williams happened to be working at the sister plant that I was working at, Ohio Malleable Iron. He was working at the factory next door, and we had actually probably seen each other at lunch hour. We didn't know each other, but I think he felt a certain amount of solidarity with me and so on. Anyway, we learned later that the jury wanted to bring back a guilty verdict, but you need a unanimous, I guess. Unanimous. Anyway, he kept insisting to bring the jury back to consider more evidence, and finally he wore the rest of the jury down, and they came out with not guilty. So I won. But the point is, juries is just about the only thing left of a democratic ethos in the United States. Elections, bought and paid for, unless you're very good, like Montgomery or something. You can overcome that, but in most cases, the representatives of the people are representatives of the billionaires, and they've done away with all restrictions on contributions. So it's the money powers, and they are inherently undemocratic. They have no interest in democracy. They have an interest in their own power and wealth, privilege, and the system as it is, they call stability. And so you don't have any democracy in the United States. You think your little vote, you go down with great civic pride or whatever. Well, I am not against it, but the billions and trillions spent on propaganda and so on usually trumps that, and no pun intended. Yeah, here we go. He references jury nullification. This is when a person is obviously guilty. This is Miller, of a crime, but the jury, because they are ideologically sympathetic to the perpetrator, will not sentence them to the crime which was obviously committed. Jury nullification. So someone who's obviously. Now you think if there's a pool of 12 American citizens, upstanding citizens, and there's an obvious crime committed, they're going to exonerate them with no countervailing evidence, whatever? No, I don't think so. But you see, they've created the narrative. Jury trials, in many cases, are already being abridged, from what I learned from the Lawyers Guild. and the ACLU. They say that in so many cases they are prohibiting the right of a jury trial. So it's one judge making the decision. Uh, I have to study that more. So, so he's saying that there's been an 8,000% increase in violent assaults on authorities. These were not one off episodes. This is repeat, systemic, organized, and funded insurrection. Insurrection. You know, I was not sympathetic to what is it, the demonstration at the Capitol building in the wake of what is January 6th? Is that it? I'm not sympathetic to those people, but I thought it was definitely hyperbolic to call it an insurrection. But here's where the Orwellian use of language comes in. I don't usually like that term, it's overused. But Orwellian is about the best way to say it. It's an insurrection if they say it is. Big words signifying nothing. But here they're saying, Miller is saying that there's an ongoing insurrection and armed resistance. Armed resistance? Oh, that reminds me. When Alex Pretty was shot dead by 15 rounds, and make sure he's dead, good and dead, in Minneapolis, Miller immediately took to the airwaves to say that, to quote his exact words, well, that he was an armed terrorist bent on murdering ICE officers. That's what he said. Unfortunately for him, we have several different angles of footage. Mr. Pretty had a holstered pistol, which he did not draw. When the ICE officers, for no particular reason, knocked a woman to the curb, he went to try to assist her to her feet or shield her from the kicks. They had about 7 or 8 pigs that jumped on top of him. One of them reached in and grabbed the pistol, took it out, and stepped away from the scene. Someone said a weapon. So the swine, they proceeded to empty their pistols, 12 or 15 shots, make sure the man was dead. He was a nurse that took care of disabled people, elderly, like me. Can't do anything in this world except destroy, tear down, spread hatred. Well, I don't think we can go through all of this. It's the leftist looks at what is beautiful and what is good and what is natural, and he's filled with envy and hatred. So we're looking at what is good and beautiful, like Gaza, like ICE imprisoning kids, like homelessness. We look at all these good and beautiful things. Police violence, they kill about 2,000 unarmed people every year, according to the London Guardian. We look at those beautiful things. We're filled with hatred. Then he goes into a long diatribe about if you ever see a left wing protest, look at the people real closely. Do any of them look normal? I guess he's referring to pink hair or something like that, you know. No one looks normal. They're all deformed in some way, in their appearance, in their dress, in their mannerisms. Why is that? If you look at two photographs and you see a normal American in the street, and you see an Antifa protester, why do the people that are violently demonstrating, why is it there not one normal looking person among them? Well, I don't know about the rings and ears and even in the lip. I don't. But I think it's fairly harmless in its an expression. We were said something in school about self-expression and individuality, and that's part of being an American, right? Or is it just a conformity? I'll just do a little more of this. They're coveting. We are coveting people who are morally superior. Yeah, he's referencing the Bible. The earliest wisdom taught to us in the Bible about coveting. And I'm not talking about rich versus poor, although the capitalists never get tired, the right wing never gets tired about that. Yeah, you're just envious of the trillionaires. It's not that the trillionaires are running this world into the goddamn living hell. It's that we just want to be them. That we want to be great. But he says, I'm talking about a much deeper kind of coveting. Coveting people who are morally superior, who are superior in a simple, truthful way. They live their lives. People that they look at who are happy and ordered and peaceful and contributing to their communities. That burns an ember in them. And they end up with the horrors we've seen throughout history where good families are dragged out into the street and executed. Now, where has that happened? It's happened by ICE kicking down people's doors, dragging honest people out into the street. You see the inversion? So that's about good people of all walks of life understand that you always be accused of raising an alarm too loudly. If you wait until the point where the worst outcome is so obvious that no one can deny it, then you've already lost the battle. Well, that's what I say. I'm like Bonhoeffer. At first, they came for the communists. We weren't communists. He was a minister. Then they came for the socialists. We weren't socialists. Well, maybe kind of. And they came for the Jews, and we weren't Jews. They came for us, and it was too late. And that's where we are now. These diatribes, they may seem, I don't know, to me, just totally ridiculous, but they're very serious. And the concentration of power and wealth in this world goes beyond anything ever. And this means that with enough chutzpah, enough force and violence, yes, Miller says this world, I have it here, this world is run by strength, force, and violence. It's what they call realism. And they are well schooled in what they call realism. So to use the power that they, like Trump says every day, I can turn around into a parking lot, destroy their civilization. Well, any checks and balances, the only check on my power is my own conscience. You know? So they are, I don't think it would be an understatement to say that these people are intoxicated with power, which doesn't come from them. Their doings come from the fact that they have $1 trillion military, which they've built. I'll wrap this up. Then we have Scott Besset, who wants to weaponize the financial system to choke off left-wing organizations, which he says are being funded, from some billionaires or some foreign countries. Yes, one more thing from I mentioned before, but to quote Miller, the old ideological boundaries are now giving way to new operational alliances. The united front between international Marxism and radical Islamic movements need not share the same ultimate vision, but share the immediate enemy of free and self-governing societies. So, as I already mentioned, there is no alliance anywhere in the world. The Islamics, as we all know, were used against the pro-Soviet regime in Afghanistan, as I mentioned, Indonesia, and throughout the Middle East, the so-called secular regime of Iraq, and so on and so forth. There's been a long-standing alliance and support and funding, so-called. They built, when they were trying to destroy the beautiful government of PDLA in Afghanistan, they built madrasas all along the border. Pakistan, the Shia, the military dictatorship in Pakistan, all along the border, they built these camps to raid into, but in conjunction, they had a madras where they would study scriptures. A particular version of Islam, which was fanatical and violent. So I'll wrap this up. There's a couple more quotes I'd like, but you could download the speeches if you like. They're very as I say, I think that we should take these. I've seen some commentary about it, but really should put an alarm bell because they're laying out their plan to destroy civil society or the part of civil society that they feel threatened by. The capitalists in the world today, you would not imagine that they would feel so threatened since they have all the motive, means, and opportunity, and all the wealth, and all the military that has ever been dreamed of. But they are because of the instability of their financial system. And we'll get into that next time. You have comments, Elsa?
No.
Okay. Well, uh, I hope, I don't know. I'm raising an alarm bell. I don't know why. We don't have the reach that these 60 countries, with all their media, would you say they have more? How much reach do we have, Elsa? We have much reach?
I think we have like 40 subscribers.
And how many views do we get on average? 200 or something?
100.
I was exaggerating our reach. Anyway, we communists of the old school, we do what we do. We see signs of hope and more signs of despair. But when you're how did the Chinese put it? When you're a monk, you go on tolling the bell. So I guess I'll go on tolling the bell. Unfortunately, we have so many people I couldn't, too many to name, that are really stepping up and calling a spade analysis, beautiful analysis of the Middle East and all of these things, the corruption of the Trump administration. You even have a couple of congressmen calling that out. It's really quite extraordinary how they're manipulating the markets with their tweets or their statements. We've got a peace agreement, and then they all short the oil market. Then the next day they say, well, now we're back to war, so then they go long. So it's the derivatives market, which is I forget 80 trillion, 70 trillion. A huge casino. That's where you're living, people. So Trump, with his own hands, he built several casinos. But basically, the whole system is a casino. And so we wish the best. And if you, I just recommend doing something. That's what we're doing. We're doing something. We don't expect great results, but we don't feel comfortable doing nothing.
All right. Till next time.
That's a wrap.